I wanted to take a look at this article. It's on NBCnews.com. It's NBC's website. The title of the article is Everything We Learned from the Trump Impeachment Hearings. So, as a lot of you guys probably know, the impeachment hearings have been going on for like the past week or something, I think. And it's been really interesting. It's been fascinating. They've called in witnesses and had people testifying and everything else. So I wanted to give this article a read and see what kinds of things we're dealing with. Like, what do we have going on with the impeachment hearing right now? Is there any kind of legitimacy to it? So let's just take a look through here. From Wednesday, November 13th to Thursday, November 21st, Americans were glued to their televisions, computers, and streaming devices as the House Intelligence Committee held a series of long public hearings as part of a broader Democratic-led impeachment inquiry against President Donald Trump. Here are all the things we learned from 2 jam-packed weeks of public testimony. Bill Taylor, the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, kicked off the stretch of hearings with a revelation that one of his staffers overheard a phone call between Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, and Trump on July 26th, the day after the call between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, that prompted the impeachment inquiry. The staffer, later identified as David Holmes, a counselor for political affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine, heard Trump ask Sondland about the investigations, Taylor said, referring to probes into the Biden family and a conspiracy theory about the 2016 election. So that's kind of where the impeachment stuff really took off this past week, is with Bill Taylor testifying about a conversation that a staffer overheard between Sondland and Trump. I've been talking about the impeachment inquiry for a while here, but let me just give a little bit of background on this. For those of you who may not have been keeping up with this at all, the impeachment inquiry started because Donald Trump, this has been established at this point, Donald Trump told the president of Ukraine he wanted him to start an investigation into a political opponent of his, into Donald Trump's political opponent, and say something about it publicly, make a public statement about it. And if he didn't, he wouldn't get the $400 million of U.S. aid that Congress had already promised to him. And he actually held up that money and prevented it from going to Ukraine until the president made this announcement about the investigation. So that's where it started. Those were originally all allegations. But since Bill Taylor kind of started flipping, since Bill Taylor started talking and telling the story, Sondland, who, interestingly enough, was a high-dollar donor of Donald Trump, and that's how he got his position, Sondland came out and testified against Trump and said, was there a quid pro quo? Was there bribery? Did Donald Trump try to bribe the Ukrainian president to start an investigation? Sondland said the answer is yes, there was a quid pro quo. That's a really big deal. That is like bigger than Watergate kind of big deal. Whether you believe this stuff or not, which I do, we've had like 6 or 7 or 8 people come out and testify that this is what happened. And these are firsthand testimonies. This is like, Donald Trump said this to me. And then the next guy comes in, Donald Trump said this to me. Rudy Giuliani said this, and he said he was doing this for Trump and all of this stuff. Whether that stuff is true or not, it needs to be investigated heavily. If it is true, which I believe it is, this is bigger than Watergate, I would say. Watergate was just where where Nixon got some people to break into the Watergate Hotel and steal some documents. The cover-up is really the big deal with Watergate, like what Nixon did to try to cover up the whole thing. Like if he hadn't tried to cover it up and go to all the lengths that he went to, Nixon, then it may not have gone down so terribly for him. But in this case, the action is worse than the Watergate scandal with Nixon. Like the whole Trump impeachment thing, that's worse than Watergate, I would say. So Anyways, let's continue reading. Holmes provides more details. Holmes said he was left out of a July 26th meeting in Kyiv between Sondland and Yermak, a top aide to Zelensky, but it was after that meeting that Holmes joined Sondland and others for a fateful lunch in Kyiv. Sondland dialed up Trump on his cell phone at the table, Holmes testified. He said he overheard President Trump ask, so he's going to do the investigation? And that Ambassador Sondland replied, he's going to do it, and that Zelensky will do anything you ask him to. Holy shit. Volker becomes a quid pro quo believer. Kurt Volker, the former U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine, also amended his testimony from his closed-door deposition, saying he now sees that others in the Trump administration sought an investigation into the Biden family and that they told Ukraine's government that millions in military aid depended on it. We followed the president's orders, quote-unquote. Sondland, in his testimony, directly pointed his finger at Trump, saying the president ordered that he, Volker, and Energy Secretary Rick Perry work with his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, on Ukraine policy, even though they were uncomfortable with Giuliani's role and associations. Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and I worked with Mr. Rudy Giuliani on Ukraine matters at the express direction of the President of the United States, he said. The reason that people are speculating that Trump has had Giuliani involved in the first place at all is because no matter what happens, Trump believes that attorney-client privilege applies. So no matter what, Giuliani cannot be called to testify against Trump in any way. As it turns out, that only applies to criminal trials, not to impeachments. Impeachments are treated differently. Attorney-client privilege does not apply. It seems. That's how it's looking at this moment. A direct line to Trump. Sondland also confirmed he'd held the July 26th phone call that Taylor had revealed. Sondland, who already corrected his prior closed-door testimony once before, had not previously revealed the existence of the call. His confirmation of it revealed he had a direct line to Trump, as others testified. Everyone was in the loop. In an explosive part of his opening statement, Sondland implicated Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, and several other top officials in those two agencies. Sondland said he'd made Pompeo and Bolton fully aware at every turn of what he, Volker, and Perry were doing with regard to Ukraine policy at the direction of Giuliani. And he brought the emails, including direct responses from Pompeo, to prove it. Mulvaney, a part of Irregular Channel. Taylor testified that White House Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney was part of the irregular shadow communications channel between Washington and Kyiv that had sought a quid pro quo with Ukraine. It was sought bribery. That's what quid pro quo means. And I feel like we shouldn't be using the term quid pro quo. I think we should be using what it literally means in English, which is bribery. It translates to tit for tat, I think. T-I-T for T-A-T. And it basically means this thing for that thing. Bribery. That's what it is. That's like the definition of bribery. So I feel like we should be calling it bribery, not quid pro quo, because that's a little bit like in the weeds and not everybody actually knows what that term means. So anyway, I'm going to start referring to it as bribery instead of quid pro quo. Taylor testified that White House Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney was part of the irregular shadow communications channel between Washington and Kyiv that had sought bribery with Ukraine. That channel had already been known to include Giuliani, Sondland, Volker, and Perry. It's honestly fascinating to me that Sondland flipped on Trump like that, because he was like a high-dollar donor for him. I'm genuinely impressed by the guy, but you could see him at the impeachment hearings. He was all smiles, like he wanted to be there. It was like he wanted to be in the history books, and now he is. That's kind of just the impression that I got from Sondland. But you know what? Whatever. As long as he's telling the truth, for better or worse, I don't care. As long as he's getting the truth out. That's all I really care about. And then we've got this section called Witness Intimidation. Just moments after Marie Yovanovitch, the ousted U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, who, by the way, has been the ambassador to Ukraine, I think, or maybe just the ambassador to the EU. Anyways, she's been in the government since Ronald Reagan. I think Reagan even appointed her as ambassador to something. That's like 30-something years. That's like a really long time that she's been in the position. And she's trusted, she's nonpartisan, or she's trusted across the aisle. And of course, Trump came in and started just destroying her reputation, which is really sad, honestly. Anyways, it says, just moments after Marie Yovanovitch, the ousted U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, testified that she felt threatened after learning that Trump told Zelensky during their July 25th call that she was bad news and that she was going to go through some things, Trump tweeted more attacks on her, including everywhere Marie Yovanovitch went turned bad, destroying her reputation again. And by the way, reputation in this game, in the ambassadorship game, is everything. If you have a bad reputation, then the countries that you're working with aren't going to respect you at all. Asked in real time during the hearing about the president's tweets, Yovanovitch called them intimidating, very intimidating. So right now it's looking like there are 4 or 5 articles of impeachment that could be written up against Trump. Witness intimidation being one of them. Fox News has even been, just like on every program practically, been saying, Mr. Trump, or President Trump, we know that this upsets you. Stay off of Twitter. Because you are actively, you could walk out of this in handcuffs for what you say on Twitter. He's actively interfering in a government hearing right now. He's actively interfering with witnesses who are testifying against him. That is bad for him. So that's the first article of impeachment they could draw up. Also, since the impeachment hearings have started, there's information that's come to light about something in the Mueller report. Mueller discovered that a phone call had happened between Trump and somebody else. I don't really remember clearly. But Trump says that it never happened, or he said that he doesn't remember it happening, or something like that. And we have discovered now, without a shadow of a doubt, that it did in fact happen. And that means that there's a high chance that Trump was lying. I guess he could legitimately not remember the phone call, but anyways, they're saying that is one of the articles of impeachment that they may write up on him. So right now they've got lying under oath for that one. And they've got witness intimidation. They've got the bribery thing with Zelensky. And there are a couple more that they were talking about. I don't remember what they were now. So these impeachment hearings, a lot of the questions have been asked on the Republican side by Devin Nunes. And I think he's a Republican senator. So this new news just broke like yesterday or the day before. Devin Nunes was directly involved in the push for Biden-Ukraine investigations, says Lev Parnas. Brand new information, and this person is trying to testify against Nunes. So the person who's leading the hearings on the Republican side is even involved in this whole situation, apparently, according to this person. So let's see what this article has to say. This is by Vox, written by Sean Collins. Ed McMahon, a lawyer for Rudy Giuliani associate Lev Parnas, who faces charges of campaign finance violations, has told the Daily Beast that his client helped Republican Representative Devin Nunes arrange meetings meant to advance the Ukrainian investigations into the Biden family that are at the center of the ongoing impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump. Now, another lawyer for Parnas, Joseph A. Bondi, has told CNN that Parnas is willing to testify before the House Intelligence Committee about Nunes' involvement in the Ukraine scandal. Nunes is the ranking member of that committee, and in that capacity has led the Republican defense of Trump during the recent public impeachment inquiry hearings. Nunes has argued the impeachment inquiry is a partisan attack on the president. He tried to derail the proceedings by introducing disproved conspiracy theories, worked to out an anonymous whistleblower whose complaint launched the inquiry, and repeatedly referred to the inquiry as a drug deal. I just want to point something out here. Like, they are making this giant deal out of revealing who the whistleblower is. And first of all, the whistleblower only drew attention to the situation. Everybody involved past that is out in the open. Yovanovitch, Sondland, Bill Taylor, all of these people, like that whistleblower could just disappear tomorrow. And any piece of evidence that he provided, or she, any piece of evidence they provided could disappear tomorrow, and it would be irrelevant because we have the testimonies of these people who were there, who Trump talked to, who Trump said these things to. So the whistleblower's identity is so completely irrelevant to this situation. The only thing that revealing this person's name would do is put their life in danger, or put them in danger. That's it. That is it. Never mind the fact that Trump said that being a whistleblower like that is close to treason, and we used to do things differently with spies back in the day. I mean, he tweeted something like that out. That is absolutely absurd. So they're making a big deal out of revealing the whistleblower's name. Whistleblower is so completely irrelevant. Does not matter who he is or she. Doesn't matter who they are. They could disappear tomorrow and it would not matter. We have more than enough evidence without them or what they provided to move forward with this whole thing. So anyway, we'll see what happens. Devin Nunes was implicated in this whole thing, so here's where the hang-up is. Here's where Trump failed with this whole situation. He had a dinner or something with Comey, remember, forever ago, and he said to Comey that he wanted people who were loyal. He wanted loyalty. It seems like he kind of followed in that path. Like, that's what he looked for. Every time he appointed somebody, every time he put somebody new in the cabinet or in the Supreme Court or in the whatever, he wanted to know that they were loyal to him. That's basically what it boiled down to. Unfortunately, there are tens of thousands of people in the government, and he did not replace all of them. He only replaced, like when Obama left the White House, all of his staffers left with him. Like, that's how it works. When you switch presidencies, Obama had to staff the White House when he took office. Bush had to staff the White House when he took office. Like, you have to staff the White House. And so Trump filled the White House, surrounded himself with his own people, as every president does. And he thought that that was enough to protect him from whatever. He thought that that was enough, that everybody around him was going to be loyal. But there are like tens of thousands of government officials. There are like tons of military people and ambassadors and all kinds of other people all over the place that he just didn't even think about because they've been there since Reagan's era. And now they're all coming out and testifying against him, like Yovanovitch, for example. So anyway, honestly, I would love to see this impeachment inquiry continue on and implicate anybody who was involved. Everybody. I want to just root the corruption out completely. Devin Nunes, if he actually was involved, as this article says, as these people are saying, I want him out of the government. I want him in prison. I've said this on my podcast. I've said this on my main channel before. Power is the most disgusting thing that you can do to me, like, in my eyes. If you abuse your authority, if you position, you are the lowest piece of shit. Just like I said about David Silverman sleeping with attendees of conferences that he was the president of, that he organized. You're the lowest piece of shit for doing things like that. So I want to see anybody who is actually involved in abuse of power or corruption in any form. I want to see them in handcuffs. I want to see them in prison. If you like what I do and you want to make sure I can continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, you can support me on Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring. I'm trying to make a shirt design for every cult I've covered. I haven't gotten every one, but I'm working on it. So check it out and see if your cult is up there. Second, you can support me by checking out my game shop. I sell controller, cartridge, and game box stands for every system from the original Nintendo and Sega Game Gear to the Xbox One and Nintendo Switch. So give that that'll look too. And finally, if you want to support me in some way other than monetarily, you can check out my other YouTube channels. I have a retro game channel where I answer questions like, why does Shy Guy have a mask? And why are CRT TVs the best way to play retro games? I also have the podcast where I talk about stuff I don't feel I can say on a monetized channel. And finally, I have my main channel where I talk about cults. I wish I didn't have to worry about dancing around subjects carefully in the first place, but I chose to do this as a full-time job, so unfortunately, I rely on YouTube's AdSense and on the support of patrons to continue doing the work I do. Anyways, check me out in all those places if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, guys.